Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. Our mission is to bring you great interviews with preppers from around the world so you can be better informed and better prepared for everything from a hurricane to the end of the world as we know it. This episode is brought to you by CampingSurvival.com. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including bug-out bags, long-term storage food, water filters, gas masks, and first aid kits. Check them out online today at CampingSurvival.com. Be sure to enter coupon code PrepperRecon for a 5% discount on your entire order. Today's guest is Kieth Pendleberry of OneCancerCure.com. Keith, thanks for taking time to come on the show today.
You're welcome, Mark. I'm glad to be here with you.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on. Preppers spend a lot of time preparing to survive economic collapse, EMPs, earthquakes, or any number of disasters that would cause us to have to survive on our own without many of the services we rely on today. These are all serious risks, but the odds of getting cancer are 45% for a male and 38% for females, according to cancer.org. The risk of dying of cancer are 23% for males and 19% for females. You have a passion for studying cancer and cancer treatment. Can you tell us about how you developed that passion?
Well, there are two things that happened. The first one is many years ago, I had a skin cancer on one of my cheeks, which was removed, and the doctor told me afterwards that there was still a little bit left and I'd have to be monitored, but that was over 20 years ago, so I think we handled that one really good. But the big problem really was a number of years ago, about 2001, my father developed a very serious cancer on his neck. And I had been working with some other people who had cancer, and we had developed a bit of a protocol that showed really good promise. And I sent down to my father the things that I believed would help him. This was in early January. They didn't want us to know and ruin Christmas for us, so they let me know in the early New Year. And my father's cancer started to go into regression. And the spot on the side of his neck where the fluid was weeping out of started to shrink quite noticeably. And then about 2 months into that working for him, and it was obvious to everybody, including his cancer specialist, the cancer specialist phoned my dad and said, "Ted, it's time for you to take your radiation treatment." Now, my dad was 84 at the time. He had successfully battled skin cancer a number of years earlier with skin grafts from his back, and that had worked out well. But this was different. A little older, a little more concerned now, had a lot of things to live for. And my dad said to the cancer specialist, "What you've seen that what I'm doing, what my son sent me is working, and the cancer on my neck is getting smaller. How about we just continue with what my son sent me, and I will trade with the guy who's behind me on the list to get radiation. And if it ever starts, if this thing on my neck ever starts to take off again, then I'll just be next in line." And the cancer specialist told my dad, "Sorry, Ted, that isn't how it works. There's a waiting list, and if you don't take it when it's your turn, you go to the end of the waiting list. And right now, that's 2 years. And I really think you should have this, Ted." And basically, they persuaded my dad to have the radiation treatments, and 90 days to the day after he had his first radiation treatment, my father died. What they didn't tell my dad was that according to a radiologist's standards, if you have a tumor and they radiate it, a successful cancer treatment is to knock it back to half its size for 28 days, after which it will probably start to grow again because you've killed all the easy stuff, and you would then need much more radiation to kill what's left, probably enough to kill the person. And the other thing they didn't tell my dad, and don't tell anybody, is that radiation will wipe out totally your immune system. And in the long run, your immune system is what overcomes cancer. Your job, if you're going to fight it, is to weaken the cancer so that your immune system can take over and kill what's left. And there are various things that you can do that can help that and keep it from spreading. And so I know what my dad went through, because although my dad was 4,000 miles away from me, he was living with my sister Val, who is, in every sense of the word, a real angel. She looked after my mother, and when my mother died, and she was looking after Dad, and she would phone me at night, and she would be in absolute tears. Now, my sister is a registered practical nurse in the province of Ontario, Eastern Canada, and she has seen a lot of people die, and it takes a lot to get her upset. She would be in tears as she was describing the pain my dad would go through, and I swore that if I could do anything to see to it that nobody had to go through what my dad went through ever again, I would do it. And that's how I proceeded with another several years of perfecting the treatment with the selenium that I recommend and the other things that I recommend. And that's why I give it away free. That's my passion.
You've done quite a bit of research pertaining to selenium. Can you tell us a little bit more about the selenium research that you've done?
Well, it's been I'd say over 25 years that I've been researching cancer. I have 7 children, and cancer in the odds of the way it is would affect somewhere between 3 and 4 of us in the kids in the family, and I didn't want that to happen. So I wanted to look ahead and see what I could do to prevent it. And so I was doing research on all kinds of nutritional things that would help, and every once in a while I'd run across something on selenium. And I would run across things on vitamin C and vitamin E and other sorts of things that were promoted as various cures and treatments and all the rest of it. But the selenium things that I saw tended to have more scientific backing to them. And so they were very much appreciated because I like science. I like it when you have lab tests and you know that somebody was diagnosed properly by a doctor beforehand, and everything is proven by the lab tests and the tissue samples and all the rest of it, and you know exactly what the treatment was, and you know exactly what the outcome was. And one of the best ones that I really liked and found early on was the late 70s, was a study that was done at the St. Louis Veterans Affairs Hospital by a Dr. Donaldson. Now, Dr. Donaldson believed that selenium could help people who had cancer. He wasn't sure. He wanted to have a trial of live people because you can do things in test tubes that work in test tubes because you can manipulate things in the test tube that people would die from. And you can do animals, but that isn't necessarily the same as people because their immune systems are different, they respond different. You can give rats enough stuff that it would kill everybody. And the rats just seem to thrive and survive. People can't tolerate the kind of things that you can give, so you have to have people. And Dr. Donaldson was aware that a number of veterans, these are all men in those days, had been treated at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in St. Louis for cancer. And many of them had all the surgery, all the chemotherapy, all the radiation that was appropriate for their cancer in those days. And the cancer had returned. They were considered to be terminal. They were going to die, some in a few weeks, some in a few months. And he proposed to this 140 men that they be given as a last chance therapy a dose of selenium that was appropriate to what selenium level was in their blood. And he tested their blood, and those that had a fairly substantial level, according to the thinking at the time, were given about 3 capsules worth of selenium, about 600 micrograms a day. Those that had a much lower amount of selenium got more selenium to hopefully bring it up to the theoretical level that should be safe. They would get up to 10 capsules worth of selenium per day, 2,000 micrograms. Dr. Donaldson only made one mistake in his thinking process, and that was that if you had a certain amount of selenium in your body, you would be safe from cancer. That part was right, but the wrong part was that cancer victims were not able to absorb the selenium well enough, and that's why they got the cancer. That isn't the case. But in any event, they had these 140 men. They took 2 new cancer specialists who had never treated these men before. They looked over all of the documentation on each man. They physically examined them, and they each declared that each of these 140 men were going to die, some within a few weeks, some within a few months. And once all of that protocol was done, the men were given the amount of selenium that was selected for them. Now, about 18 months into the study, which was going to be a 4-year study, Dr. Donaldson was killed. I believe it was in a car accident. But at the end of the 4 years, 106 of these 140 men were still alive with no symptoms of cancer. That was a 75% survival rate in individuals who were known to be terminal. Now, I believe that probably those individuals who were going to determined to be terminal within a few weeks, those are probably the ones that died because there wasn't enough time for the selenium to work. The ones who probably were the ones who survived were the ones who had several months to live, and there was time for the selenium to work. And that was one really good study, because very rarely do you get a chance to do anything with real human beings. And these men participated because they had been through everything and there was nothing left. And the 75% survival rate was absolutely fabulous. There are numerous other studies. There was one that was done in the eastern United States on skin cancer that was done through 7 skin cancer clinics. And they picked skin cancer because it's easy to detect, easy to see, and easy to treat. And there were 1,300 people. They divided it into 2 groups, and half of them got selenium and half of them didn't. And after a few years, they didn't find it had anything to do with the skin cancer. It didn't seem to have any notable effect. These old men and women had skin cancer already, and it didn't seem to affect whether it came back or not. But a huge difference in about 60 to 70% reduction in prostate cancer, lung cancer, other types of cancers. And so the people that got the selenium were much, much better off than the people that didn't. And there have been numerous others. There's hundreds of studies that are done that are have been written up in the scientific literature. And I put links to those in the ebook and on the website for people to look up. And I don't ask anybody to believe me. I'm just a normal human being like everybody else. I like to read and I like science. But the science, it is very good. And of course, I wrote the OneCancerCure book about my friend Roger, who had terminal prostate cancer. His PSA, Roger was 77. Normal PSA, or high normal PSA for a man at his age, would be 6.5 in Canada. If a man had that in the United States, the doctors would like to cut off every piece of male anatomy they could get at. Anything over 2 or 3 is considered terrible in the U.S. In Australia, they'd have you in the hospital so quick it'd make your head spin. But Roger's PSA over a period of a couple of years, and I didn't know this, he was a good friend of mine, but it was a private thing that he and his wife kept to themselves, gradually climbed. And one day, Roger's wife asked me if I could take Roger, he lived 45 miles out of town, if I could take Roger to the hospital to visit the cancer specialist. And that was the first I knew he had cancer. We sat in with the cancer specialist, and he said, Roger, your PSA has gone from 38 to 44 in the last 6 months. Based on my 18 years of experience as a cancer specialist, this means your cancer is now terminal. You have at most 6 to 9 months to live. There's nothing medical science can do for you. The best advice I can give you is to go home and get your affairs in order. 98 days later, well, when we left the office, Roger turned to me, and he's a Swiss-German fellow, and he turned to me and he said, "Well, Dr. Pendleberry, what you going to do for me now?" That was Roger's way of saying, I need help. And so we did the protocol that I had done with my father, then advanced a little bit. 98 days later, Roger's PSA fell from 44 to 1.31, which is a 95% drop, down to 20% of what would have been perfectly normal for a man his age. And 2 years later, it was even better than the cancer specialist's PSA. And so that's why I wrote the ebook. The cancer specialist was so amazed at what happened that he gave Roger and his wife all the lab tests that had happened to him over a 4-year period of time. And I put them in the ebook so people could see what happened to Roger and explain the story as it developed, so that people would have hope that there was something that might work for them. I can't guarantee that everybody will be cured, because I can't guarantee that people will take the right amount of selenium, and take it all the time, that they will do all the things that they need to do. But for those people who do, I think there's good hope.
Now, how does selenium work to fight cancer?
Well, every single cell in your body has a built-in mechanism that causes the cell to die, so that at a certain age of the cell, it can be replaced by another, more effective cell. It's called apoptosis. Now, in cancer cells, that switch, that on program death switch is turned off. So instead of that cancer cell dying and being replaced by another cancer cells divide, and so one cancer cell is replaced by two cancer cells. And that's why you get tumors. Cancer cells absorb selenium 5,000 times faster than normal cells do. They just suck it up if they possibly can. And that's why Dr. Donaldson's patients had low selenium levels, was because the cancer was absorbing the selenium from their blood. And it isn't that they couldn't absorb it from their food, it's that the cancer was sucking it out of their blood, and so their blood levels were low. If you give people enough selenium, the selenium will do one of two things to cancer cells. It will either poison the cell directly, or it will activate that apoptosis switch that causes the cell to then die. And that's that simple it works. Now, it is, in effect, something like chemo, but it has an amazing advantage over chemotherapy. Chemotherapy doesn't work as well as most people would like to think it does, or as well as most doctors would tell you that it does, or like to believe it does, because 80%, 85% of all the cells in a tumor are normal cells in your body. Only 10, 15, 20% of them are cancer cells. And these normal cells will actually protect or try to protect the cancer cells in the process of protecting themselves, because what chemochemicals do is chemochemicals kill all the rapidly new growing cells in the body. So they will kill the new kidney cells that are supposed to come along and replace the kidney cells that have died, the new brain cells, the new heart cells, the new liver cells, the new pancreas cells. And so if chemo would only attack cancer, that would be magnificent. That's what selenium does. Selenium only works on cancer cells.
Can selenium be used as a preventative measure?
This is the thing that I think would be of most advantage to the prepper community. People like me, people like you, people who are your listening audience, because when you have a situation where you're living off of the land, as it were, trying to get by on the things that you've stored, and you don't necessarily have the very best, the very freshest of everything, the rate of cancers is going to go up. The exposures to chemicals that are in the environment, because people are less cautious, will go up. If you take selenium, and I would say I've worked with a lady, for instance, who has a daughter who's 2.5, who took 3 capsules of selenium a day. The girl weighed 25 pounds. She had cancer. So it's safe down to young ages. I wouldn't suggest many people take that many, especially if they don't have cancer. But you can take cancer at this point in time to reduce your risk of cancer. I would say if you're under 30, 35, 1 capsule of selenium, a specific kind of selenium I'm going to point out, is going to, one a day, should reduce your risk of getting any type of tumor-forming cancer by about 80%. If you're older and you've been exposed to more natural background radiation, more chemicals in the environment, then you would want to take more for a period of time to knock back any kind of tumor that has started but has not been big enough to be diagnosed yet. And I outlined this in the OneCancerCure free ebook that I give away to people who go to my OneCancerCure website and just send me their email address and what country they're in, so I can send all of that information out to them.
Now, are there doctors that recommend selenium?
There are lots of doctors that recommend selenium. I've had doctors from India and Israel and all over the United States and Canada that have written to me. I had one the other day that basically let me know he was a naturopath and he wanted this for his patients. So I've had lots that have over the time. Most of the time, they're very open about it. I had one doctor locally had an interesting story. Her father, I know she was female because I heard from this from another doctor. He phoned me and said, Dr. So-and-so's father is in a town about 80 miles away, and the old man has prostate cancer, and he doesn't want to be chemically castrated with these shots they want to give him. He wants your treatment. And I thought, I didn't know how the guy even knew about it because it had just been online about 3 weeks. And he said the old man wanted his daughter, who was a doctor in Salmon Arm here, to get a copy from me so that she could then do what needed to be done for him. And I phoned her office 2 or 3 times. I went to see her. It was like I was persona non grata. She didn't want to have anything to do with me publicly. And I had to take the copy of the ebook to my family physician who contacted me and give it to him so he could pass it on to her privately so she could do what needed to be done for her father. But usually most doctors are quite open. I've had numerous people tell me that their doctor has recommended that they contact me because there isn't anything the doctor can do for them.
Where can people purchase Selenium? And is it all the same, or there's some that are better than others, or they're better manufacturers than others?
Well, there are 5 forms of selenium that are sold as supplements. 2 are toxic, 2 are useless, and 1 works. Now, the 2 that are toxic, if you go to Wikipedia or someplace and you see and you look up selenium, it will tell you that selenium is highly toxic. It's a heavy metal, and they're talking there about the forms that are like rock salt, sodium selenate and sodium selenite. And those are the mineral forms. I have had one lady that phoned me several months ago, and she had taken one of these supplements, the sodium selenate supplement, as a lozenge that she put under her tongue. And the next day, her left arm didn't work. And she phoned me and said, "What do I do now?" And I said, "I have no idea. I would never recommend anybody take that because that can kill you." And we've made a few suggestions, but she basically will need detoxifying, and that will take quite a bit of effort to do. And so those are 2 that you don't want to get whatsoever. The other 2 that really aren't any good yet are selenomethionine and selenocysteine, and these are man-made types of selenium supplement that mimic the way selenium exists in some of the vegetables like broccoli or Brussels sprouts or something like that selenium is in. If there's selenium in the soil, it will be concentrated slightly in the selenium in Brussels sprouts and a few other plants of that nature. The problem is that the man-made versions of those don't work at all. They've been tried in various tests, and there's no difference between them and nothing. The type of selenium that you want is also man-made, but it relies upon a type of yeast. When they first started off in the 1980s, they used yeast like you would make bread with, Fleischmann's yeast. And they would grow it in a solution that contained some selenium in it, and the yeast would absorb some of the selenium to make a protein in the yeast. Then they would kill the yeast after it had matured, and you would have a protein powder with a little bit of B vitamins and a very tiny amount, but a very specific amount of selenium in it. Now, there are many manufacturers of selenium yeast. It's not a hard thing to make. But I only recommend one brand. I don't get paid for this, but the brand that I recommend is called SelenoXcel, SelenoExcel. It's made by Cypress Systems in Fresno, California. And it is, as far as I can determine, and I'm a real bear on science, the world standard quality. Now, there is another brand in Europe that seems to be as good, but in North America, that's the best one. Now, there is not a brand of SelenoXcel that you can buy on the market made by Cypress Systems. They sell it as an ingredient to a number of different manufacturers of selenium supplements who then use it in their own. The one I recommend personally, and the one I use personally, is sold by Swanson Vitamins in North Dakota. And the manufacturer of that particular brand, and there's a link in it in the ebook that I send out and a picture of what the bottle looks like. The manufacturer sells it for $14.99. Swanson sells the same bottle, which has 180 capsules of selenium in it, the right amount that you need for prevention purposes, for $5.49. And, you can, basically costs you $11 or $12 a year at one a day to reduce your risk of getting any form of cancer that forms of tumors, and that's the one I recommend. There are other brands, other types of selenium yeast. The problem is that if they're not made to the same high standards every time, there is no guarantee that they will be effective. And that particular brand has passed all the tests and is recognized even by the US FDA as the highest quality product that exists. And if I'm going to recommend something, I want something that I feel is honest enough to say it's going to work for you every single time. There are other brands out there that are cheaper. I don't know much cheaper, if anything, but there might be some that may be more promoted, but I don't know any that are any better. I don't know any that are as good either, for that matter.
Great. People can go to your website and sign up for the ebook, and you'll email it to them. Is that correct?
I will email them out the ebook. I have a long letter. It's about 7 or 8 pages long that goes through if they have cancer and it's threatening their life, as opposed to it's just sort of small and started. Some supplements that they might want to consider that will make it more effective. Most of the letter deals with vitamin E. There are 8 forms of vitamin E, and 3 of them have major anti-cancer activity. If you just want to prevent cancer, you don't need any of the supplements, you don't need the vitamin E. But if you're fighting for your life and it's hanging in the balance, then I wanted to give you something that would help your body recycle the selenium. So once it has killed some cancer cells, if you have these 5 supplements inside, they're just normal supplements but higher quality than you can buy in the health food stores, they will help you recycle that selenium so it can kill more cancer cells. And then as well, in order to help you, I send out 2 pages of documents that talk about how to detoxify your home. The first page is the normal warnings that occur on labels of products you would buy in your home, laundry detergent, different cleaners, all kinds of things that are on those products' labels. The second sheet is the same products, but they are the warnings that if you work in the plant that manufactures that product, what you would have to be told under workers' compensation rules so that the company would not have to pay you if you had developed some kind of illness or disease or cancer as a result of exposure to it. And when you see what the consumer is told compared to what the employee would have to be told, you're going to say, why am I even using this stuff? On top of that, I send out 2 documents that deal with carotenoids. Carotenoids are the generally red colored compounds in fruits and vegetables. If they're diluted, like in cantaloupe or in pumpkin, you get an orange instead of a red. But the carotenoids help in amazing ways for reducing inflammation, which reduces your risk of getting cancer. If you have selenium and you have some carotenoids in your diet, and you have a little bit of zinc, you don't need more than 15 milligrams a day of zinc, your body can produce far more natural killer cells, which are the cells in your bloodstream that attack and kill cancer cells that are migrating from a tumor to another part in your body. Normally you produce maybe 5% of your white blood cells are these natural killer cells. If you have 200 micrograms of selenium, a good amount of carotenoids, and 15 milligrams of zinc, you can produce up to 20% of your white blood cells as being these natural killer cells. And if you're fighting for your life, that's an important thing to have. So I want to make sure that we've sort of covered all the bases there. As well, when people send in some information, there is a little checkbox that says, please phone me, and a spot for people to write their phone number in. And if you live in North America, and you want to talk to me about what to do because you're not quite sure what your situation is or how you should apply this or what you need or what you don't need, I will call you. I don't charge anybody for that, never have. And most of my calls are people I usually call right away. You know, this morning that we had our conversation earlier in the day, and we're talking back and forth, and I talk to other people, and I offer the help I can.
Since this is all free and you don't sell anything and you don't have any sponsors to help with all the cost of maintaining a website and getting the message out, is there a way people can help? They can donate to help out your site?
Well, yes, there is. I realize that people with cancer don't usually have money. Things tend to be mutually exclusive there. And I think probably of about 18,000 downloads of the book, I've probably had about 60 people that have donated. So it's not something that I counted on, and I didn't really look at having to do that. So I saved up money. I'm living on what would be Social Security, in Canada, the Canadian equivalent of it. And I cut back on the food a little bit so I can put the website up and pay the cost. But every once in a while somebody says, how can we do this? And so what I did was I put a donate button on the same page that has the free ebook form to fill in just right below it. People can do there. And they can send me whatever they can. I've had donations from $50 down to $2, and it's all helpful. And so if anybody has anything that they would like to contribute, I do acknowledge everyone. I'm grateful for everyone, and we use it for that.
We have links to Keith's website, so you can head on over there now and sign up for his free ebook. Keith, thanks so much for making time to be on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
An economic storm is headed our way. The die has been cast. We must spread the word and prepare. The coming collapse will bring a contest between tyranny and freedom. If the patriot is to prevail, we must stand as one, pledge allegiance to our God, and defend the Constitution. If you are new to prepping or would like to learn more, read our 7-step survival plan. You can find it under categories on the left-hand side of our website. Thanks for listening to the Prepper Recon Podcast. God bless, and happy prepping.